Well, let's start with what's really important. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday, wonderful, gorgeous, fantastic. Oh, you're so smart. Whimsy. Happy birthday to me. And many more. Hello, blessed spirits. Hello, blessed spirits. Good to see you. I have just woken up. I am having a delicious coffee. No, I didn't have time to put on makeup. What's the point? Gosh, I just can't be bothered with that sort of thing. I besides, let's face facts. I mean, let's just keep this real. I am far too beautiful to be worrying about such things. You know what I mean? When you're as hot and lovely as I am, do you really need much makeup? All right, listen, folks. I've been going on for some time explaining to you that everything is going to be all right. Everything has been pre planned and we're going to be okay. I have, to the best of my ability, shared this information. It looks like the military action against Iran is probably ahead of schedule. They've knocked out about 85% of air defense. Scary ballistic missiles are coming into Israel. Very hard to intercept those because they go up in space and then they come down, these cluster bombs, etc. But the ballistic missiles are rather scary. Here's what's scarier. Imagine if we had just let Iran continue to develop those ballistic long-range missiles, which are now firing on Britain, by the way. Everybody who's involved with this operation understands that this had to happen. Ignore what you're hearing from political pundits. Politics is not going to get you very far in life because politics in the United States is all about dedicating yourself to a political party, and both political parties have been compromised by foreign money coming from Iran, foreign money coming from Qatar. Both political parties have taken money from Qatar. Both political parties have taken foreign money from various different groups that don't always have America best interest. As a registered Democrat, I am very concerned about the changes I see in the Democratic Party and the propaganda that sounds an awful lot like Iranian propaganda. We also know that super PACs take money from foreign donors. And at that point, we've lost America. Right? We've lost America to super PACs. If we don't get control of our super PACs, we will lose this country. Right? So that is why I no longer consider myself a member of either political party, because both political parties have been caught taking money from foreign governments with horrific human rights violations. Iran tops the list as one of the most horrific countries for human rights violations against women. And I want to say also, as a feminist, that we don't need to be taking money from countries that don't support women's rights. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan. These are countries with the worst human rights record for women. So we don't need to take their money. United Arab Emirates taking slaves, taking away workers' passports so they can't escape. That's slavery. Working them to death until they die in order to build beautiful cities in the desert. These are not countries we need to be propping up or supporting. And they have no business in the Democratic Party any more than they have a business in the Republican Party. I've also said that Mamdani was caught. his super PAC taking money not just from Muslim Americans, but from foreign Muslim organizations that were linked to various different terrorist groups. And that is why Mamdani is currently under investigation. That is why the AG of New York is investigating where that money comes from, linked back to pro-Iranian, pro-Hamas groups. Now, that's not to say that democratic socialism is a bad thing, because democratic socialism is a good thing, in my opinion. That is why Golda Meir was a democratic socialist. That's why Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of the great state of Israel, was a democratic socialist. And that's why we built the kibbutzes in Israel. We built them because we are democratic socialists and believe in the values of egalitarianism and democratic socialism. Unfortunately, conservatives began taking over Israel mostly in the 1980s, and that was right around the time that the Russians released large numbers of their criminals out, let them leave. Some of them lied, claimed they were Jewish, got Israeli citizenship. It did some real damage to Israel. But the other thing that happened was that pro-Ayn Rand conservatives from Russia began to become very politically involved. You also had Republicans that were investing in Israeli politics. And that's where you have somebody like Netanyahu, whose family are Republican conservatives. And these were the Johnny-come-latelys. These were the Johnny-come-lately Zionists, and they called themselves religious Zionists, but they were really just a bunch of Johnny-come-latelys coming to the party. Now, had they left us the hell alone, had Britain not taken Palestine after World War II, if we had remained under Turkey, because it used to be Turkey, Palestine used to be Turkey, we probably would have become completely integrated in Palestine, because the great thing about kibbutzes is they started integrating. They started bringing in Palestinians who were Jewish, Muslim. It didn't really matter, because the function was to create peace zones, this utopian world which was the kibbutz. So when the Republicans and the evangelical Christians and the Ayn Rand Bible-thumping lunatics out of Russia got into Israel, they slowly began to dismantle every beautiful, wonderful thing that the liberals, the progressives, and the democratic socialists were trying to create. And now we are in a bit of a pickle, aren't we? We are in a bit of a pickle. I believe you can do security against terrorism while still being a democratic socialist, right? You can develop ways of inclusion without oppressing people, right? You can still handle your security. Now, it's very hard for most people who live in the United States, who have never grown up in a war zone, who've never had ballistic missiles fired on them, who have never known what it is to have a safe room in your home, who have no concept of what it is to have daily rocket barrages from the north coming in from Hezbollah, or know what it is to be invaded by hundreds of terrorists over the border. They're not coming in from Mexico and with AK-47s, bombing massive neighborhoods in Los Angeles. They're not dragging the people of LA out onto the streets and raping and chopping them into pieces and then putting it on live TV for everybody to see while they laugh their head off high off drugs, right? So it is very hard for the average American to have any comprehension whatsoever about what life is like, or just how violent life is in the Middle East, how violent life is in parts of Egypt as the Islamic Brotherhood began to move in, funded by Iran. So Iran was the number one sponsor of state-sponsored terrorism. And that meant that they were building up terrorist groups like Hezbollah, which was moving in to take over parts of Syria, Lebanon, and Christians fled. Christians fled for their safety. This is why we have a lot of Christians from Lebanon, Coptic Christians from Egypt, that left the area because they were being slaughtered by these religious extremist terrorists. This was taking place in parts of Egypt with Islamic Brotherhood funded by Iran. So Iran was trying to take over the Middle East. It was taking over Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, funding the Taliban out of Pakistan, taking over parts of Iraq, and using their control of the Strait of Hormuz to make profits that went to build ballistic missiles to fire on the U.S., to fire on Britain. They're now firing on Britain, by the way. It was only a matter of time before they would have gotten a hold of a nuclear weapon. And the big threat wasn't that they themselves necessarily would build a nuclear weapon, but they were going to get a nuclear weapon. One way they could have done that was by funding the Taliban's attempts to take over Pakistan. This is why there's warring back and forth at the Pakistani-Afghanistan border. A lot of people are arguing about things that they don't know anything about. They've never been to the Middle East. They want to argue with those of us who are doing our dissertation on Middle Eastern studies. There's a lot of propaganda, and I think the only way you're going to find out what's going on is if, when this nightmare is over, you go and do some traveling. Not in a tour group. A little bit of tour groups is okay. A little bit of that. But really go and see this part of the world. When this nightmare is over, I hope you will have the opportunity to visit my country, Israel. I am an Israeli citizen. And you'll see all the good parts and all the not so great parts. And I think it will be eye-opening for you. Also see Egypt, see Jordan, see the West Bank, see United Arab Emirates. Well, United Arab Emirates, I've got mixed feelings because they have some real evidence that they've engaged in human trafficking and slavery of their employees out of the Philippines, etc. And so whether or not we should support that is questionable. Same with Qatar. We don't get to kidnap employees, right, and take their passports away. So, but I do hope that you will just come and visit and see for yourself once this nightmare is over. The nightmare is coming to an end. A way of looking at it is that you calculate, you try and find out, how can we keep people from dying? How can we keep people alive? We don't want people to die. We don't want people to die. We want people to live long, healthy lives, right? So how can we do that? So say, for example, you're given 3 or 4 choices. You open door number 1 and 500 people die. Well, that doesn't sound very good. You open door number 2 and 100,000 people die. You open door number 3 and 50 million people die from direct hits from nuclear weapons, and then the radiation fallout when the Taliban takes control of the Pakistani nuclear weapons, nuclear codes, because of sympathy within high-ranking officials in Pakistan that support the Taliban, which is why Pakistan is facing civil war right now. So the only thing that Iran had to do was get control of Pakistan. And at that point, it's game over. We already know that they have long-range ballistic missiles that can fire on Britain because that's precisely what's happening. So you think in terms of least amount of deaths. How can we keep the least? How can we prevent the most amount of deaths? And the first thing you want to do is you want to get to ceasefire as quickly as possible. In Gaza, right? Gaza's Hamas was a terrorist organization that was being funded by Iran, right? So they were raising kids to love death more than life. It was a death cult, similar to the samurai of Japan, right? We will die for Allah. We will go and have 72 virgins. It's going to be great, which is the most horrific form of child abuse. And digging tunnels underground, 60 meters underground, right? For the whole purpose was to exterminate the Jews. This is the Hamas charter, right? This is the Hamas charter. From the river to the sea, we will drive the Jews, and that is what jihad is, right? From the river to the sea, Juden raus, out Jew, Juden raus, right? This is what from the river to the sea is, because Hitler was in Egypt. Hitler's henchmen were in Egypt, building that new Third Reich, Sig Heil, right? And they were doing it all over the Middle East. So Iran became the new neo-Nazis. They became the new Nazi stronghold. But the first thing you have to do is you have to get to ceasefire. You have to stop the killing. You have to get the hostages out. They took 250 hostages, these terrorists, slaughtered and raped. It's easy to be laissez-faire when it's not your daughter being raped on live television, shot in the head, right? La, 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 right? Don't have to worry about what's going on here in the United States with Native American reservations, large percentage of reservations where malnutrition is taking place, hunger, life expectancy, 45 years. Who cares? Out of sight, out of mind, right? You don't have to worry about what's going on here at home, right? We can just project our shame and guilt onto a country we've never been to. Yeah. Once you exchange hostages, which is what's happened, release the terrorist onto the streets of Gaza. That's what the Israelis did. They released their terrorists, gave them back to Gaza. The next thing you have to do is you have to lure Hamas out of Gaza, and that's very difficult. You have to give them a life raft and say, you got to go. You can't stay here. Go to Algeria. The weather is very nice there. They love you in Algeria. Find a place for them. It was a war. You are samurai. Hi. Yes, you want to die for country. Yes. Allah Akbar. Yes. There's a place for you. Go to Afghanistan. Go to Algeria. Go to Afghanistan. They've got great chicken and rice. That is a sticking point right now, trying to get Hamas to disarm and leave. The main reason is because as long as they're smuggling through underground tunnels via Egypt weapons that are coming from Iran, this hell will never end, right? This hell will never end. So we're now at a point where we're trying to lure Hamas out and disarm them. And we're choking off their weapons supply out of Iran. Right. So if you want to free and help the people of Gaza, the first thing you have to do is get these psychos out of there. This is objective reality, not what you read on Al Jazeera, which is a rag out of Qatar. Qatar funds terrorism. This is what's really happening on the ground. Move away from politics, move away from cable television, and just start looking at data. Phase 3 is that you adopt a rebuild, which is called the New Gaza. You can't do it inside Gaza itself because Gaza is being held by a bunch of nut jobs with machine guns that think that they're going to drive the Jews the river to the sea, right? So and they will kill as many Gazans as they need to if they suspect that those Gazans are terrorists. They're going to kill anybody that gets in their way, and they do. We also see they're selling sex slaves to make money for jihad because they're no longer getting the help they need from Iran because we're choking off their supply, right? So the new Gaza that we have talked about in the past, that new Gaza is on the perimeter. And the reason that it was put on the perimeter was so that we could get people away from the terrorist, basically, from the people that were preventing them from from being peaceful. There are people in this world that don't want to be a part of this. And that is what happened. What happened was that we're now in the process of building that oasis zone, right? So let me see if I can show you some more stuff here. I'm having I always have trouble with this thing. I've never learned how to use. Okay, here we go. So the perimeter is going to look something like this. And these are safe zones for people trying to get away from Hamas, right? So they go into these safe zones. These are people that are not terrorists. These are people like, I don't want to be a part of any of this. And that is where we see the new Gaza. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump. This is a proposal that was presented to Joe Biden years ago. And it works because the purpose is to get the people away from the psychopaths who have taken over Gaza, who are holding people, including Gazans, hostage, selling them as sex slaves, etc. So this is the purpose of the oasis. That doesn't mean that the day won't come when they'll be able to go back to the central parts of Gaza. And they can stay. They don't have to go into the safe zones. But if they stay in the central parts of Gaza, they're probably not going to be able to stay safe because there are terrorists in central Gaza. Until the area is cleared, it won't be safe. If Hamas refuses to disarm, they will take people who are peaceful, get them into safe zones, and then they will obliterate central Gaza. There has to probably be some serious bombing anyway, because those tunnels are 60 meters underground, and some of them are possibly holding caches of chemical weapons. So the entire area is toxic. So it's a toxic cesspool of chemical weapons and terrorists and God knows what else. So you could stay, but we can't guarantee your safety when we start blowing this crap up, right? So that is the other reason why you get the people to safety. And then over time, the new Gaza will be built, which will hopefully also include people. Well, hopefully also they'll be able to move into central Gaza again someday, right? Once this nightmare comes to an end that was created by Iranian Nazism, right? So that is the Oasis Protocol. And it's a similar protocol to the one that was adopted by Zelensky now in the Donetsk, right? So it is this idea of creating neutral zones that are overseen by peace groups so that people can begin to live lives free of this nightmare. The fourth phase, the fourth thing you have to do is you have to remove the people that are funding the terrorism, starting with isolating Vladimir Putin. And the reason why you have to go first with Putin is because Putin has nuclear weapons. He's the most vulnerable because he's currently in the middle of a war that's gone on for years with 1 million people killed, hundreds of thousands of Russians dead. And so Russia is very vulnerable. It's also true that Putin was a state sponsor of terrorists in the sense that he was backing what Hamas did. He was meeting with Hamas. If you'd like to find out more about what happened on October 7th, on YouTube, you can watch the film called We Will Dance Again. We Will Dance Again, and you'll be able to see some of the footage that they shot live when they were raping hundreds and hundreds of Jewish women and laughing and shooting them in the head, cutting their throats, etc. All that wonderful stuff that has been edited out of the story. Believe women unless they happen to be Jews, right? This Hamas propaganda, right? Not wanting to believe the victim if the victims are Jews. And be horrified. I hope you're thoroughly horrified by the degree of anti-Semitism that has taken hold in the Democratic Party. So that the Democratic Party is no longer the party that it once was, because now it is the party of Iran and Iranian proxy bullshit, right? So that is why the Democratic Party is in trouble, because of who owns and who is putting money in the Democratic Party right now. More so than AIPAC. AIPAC doesn't put more money than, say, the Christian lobby, the evangelicals. The biggest money out of DC right now is Christian evangelical churches. And that too is questionable. But every country has lobbying groups, not just AIPAC. The Arabs have a ton of money in DC right now advocating, right? This is what people do. This is what countries do. They advocate and push, but it's gotten out of hand, right? Phase 5 is you have to take out Iran after that. You have to dismantle the leadership of Iran so that you're not looking at missiles being fired, right? You don't make a deal with Iran and Russia. You don't pay them not to kill you. You don't pay not to slay. You don't do that, because if you pay Iran and Russia to be a part of the peace accords, the only thing that happens is that they use the money to build up their military to continue to try and take the Donetsk for, the Donbass, right? It doesn't work. The only thing that works is that Iran and Russia have to be dismantled as state-sponsored terrorist governments. Russia is a different story. It has a long history of Jew hatred, going back to the czars, and that can be linked back to the Russian Orthodox Church, which has always scapegoated the Jews. It's part of their cultural heritage, right? The Jews are in the synagogues of Satan, right? Like we are worshiping Satan in our synagogues, right? This is deep, deep part of the Russian Orthodox Church, which Putin is a proud member of. And so as a result, Jews left Russia to get away from this psychosis, and they moved to Palestine, where they built these beautiful kibbutzim of integration, and then the rest is history. But the takeaway from all this data and from this conversation is this is least death calculated. It's not to say that people will not die in this process, only that less people will die in this process. This process we're seeing means we're not going to die in a nuclear war. It means that your grandchildren will not die in a nuclear war. It means that profits from the Strait of Hormuz will not be going to fund terrorism, because Iran will no longer have control of the Strait of Hormuz. And a new peace treaty will be born in the Middle East, where all parties agree to peace, integration, and tolerance. That is the Abraham Accords. So that is why I say we are ahead of schedule. We are ahead of schedule. It's scary. My friends are in bunkers. Yours aren't. You're fine. But there are sleeper cells in the United States, many of them in places like Dearborn, Michigan. Michigan is vulnerable right now. The fault is not in the fact that we went to war with Iran. That is not where the fault lay. The fault lay in the fact that Iran is funding sleeper cells, that Russia is funding sleeper cells. The war is not the cause of the sleeper cells. The sleeper cells have been here for a very, very long time, threatening our power grid, building drones that can fire on US citizens. The fault is that we have not done more to deal with this, and we should have dealt with it a long time ago and not kept this naive approach that we think we're going to get along with these people. We're not going to get along with these people. If people are coming into the United States that don't believe in the Constitution, they want to erect Sharia law, have women in burqas, take down the US government, this is probably not the country for you. right? Because this is a country where the Constitution is the law of the land. And if you don't pledge allegiance to the Constitution, this is not the place for you. Don't come here if you don't want to honor our culture and our values. So that is what's happening. Just, in terms of letting people know, the latest now coming out is that all those people that signed up for this, right? So you have the Strait of Hormuz, which is where your stuff comes from, right? Your stuff, if you want to get cheap products and you want to keep your prices down, oil and everything else, you want to think in terms of, getting control of the Strait of Hormuz, right? So now you have a signed letter where a large group of people, a number of countries are now moving in, offering to secure the Strait of Hormuz, right? And that is because it was always about getting control of the trade route and taking the power away from the leading sponsor of terrorism, right? So 22 countries now signing it. This is what we knew was going to happen. This is what we prepared for. And this is precisely what's happening. So who's coming in to help? United Arab Emirates, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Japan, Canada, the Republic of Korea, New Zealand, Denmark, Latvia, Slovenia, Estonia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Czech, Romania, Bahrain, Lithuania, Australia. That's who's moving in to put this nightmare to an end, because it's always been about the new trade route. It has always been about the new trade route. And we had talked about Donald Trump shaking hands, right? So we have Trump shaking hands with peace in Egypt, right? So that was the new peace proposal, right? It was the new peace, right? The new peace. And we have talked about that. So you have to ask yourself, if they wanted this new peace, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? We want it. We want it bad. We want it like butter on bread, right? But what is it that they want? They want that Strait of Hormuz to open up so that we no longer have to deal with terrorists attacking our ships, taking money to buy more ballistic missiles. Yeah, baby. That is what they were signing. Now, it might have not been public, but people that were studying the new trade route, people that were studying the Abraham Accords, people that were working on building these peace zones that would be part of that new trade route, we knew what was going on, and we knew what that handshake meant. We knew what that handshake meant. It meant that this was the beginning of the end of Iran. This was the beginning of the end. Because what they're saying is, let's get together and let's take these motherfuckers out. You go in first, Mr. Trump, because you're crazy enough to do this. You are psycho nuts. We don't have the fucking balls to do it. We don't have the balls to do this. But you've got the balls to do it. And once you finish up and mop up most of the job, then we'll go in. How's that work for you, Mr. Trump? You get this party started. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. Say no more. Say no more. Wink, winky. Winky, winky, winky. Oh, yeah, baby. You and I know what's going to happen now, baby. I'm a little coward. I'm a little pussycat. You go and you do it for me because I'm scared out of my bejeebies. Oh, the games children play. The games children play. Maybe we should play a little bit. Maybe we should read cards. I don't know. I think it might be fun. That's what's really going on. That's why we were able to predict what was going on. We were able to predict what was going on because we moved away from politics and we moved towards the math instead. This is why we told you what was happening in 2023. Not as a political statement. It wasn't a political thing. It was just the math. So, is Putin scared? Yes. Is there a blackout in Moscow? Yes. Are there drone attacks in Moscow? Yes. Is there attempt at a coup in Moscow to take down Putin? 100%. Is Zelensky adopting the Anderson Oasis protocol? Probably yes. That certainly is what it looks like. Building Oasis in Donetsk, which means that in time, when the area becomes stable, peace will be more profitable to Russia and Ukraine than war. And there will be no future attacks against Ukraine because the money will be poured into Oasis and integration and not into war. And at that point, you can't maintain hostilities. So that what we see happening throughout the new trade route, the joining of these trade routes will allow people to drive through this closed transportation system all the way to United Arab Emirates, to Israel, to Gaza, to Egypt. They'll even be able to drive into parts of Europe all the way to Ukraine through this trade route because they'll be going from peace zone to peace zone to peace zone to peace zone as this wave of global peace zones signed on by various different leaders all over the world. That is the future. But in order to get to that future, we're going to take out Iran. And that means also that Pakistan is going to take out the Taliban because the Taliban is going to be squeezed into extinction. No longer funded by Iran, the Taliban will be forced to move towards moderation or it will not be able to survive. All right, let's go ahead and do the empath's prayer. Thanks for being here. Let's play. Now we're going to play. You see how that works? First, we get an intellectual lecture based on real data, and then we pretend. All right. No, we're going to do some card reading. Let's do this. Okay. I want to call on white light protection for myself and this community as we ask permission from Spirit to access the Akashic records. Call on our spirit guides and our good angels to be with us. Please give us the clarity and the wisdom that is needed to empower all of us on our journeys to make the best decisions for ourselves, our families, the planet, the people we love, but also to help those that we may have strife with. And together collectively as a community, we say, Amen. All right, first thing first, let's go ahead and just take a look at what is going on from Trump's perspective. Trump, of course, has promised the world. He's promised people the world. How good for him. I don't think I like the way that's looking. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And we're going to try and do this again. Hopefully, I'm going to just try and do a little bit better. See if I can get, for whatever reason, it does whatever it does. Okay. Sometimes it puts me in vertical and I want a horizontal. Okay. Sorry about that, you guys. Okay, you guys want it overhead? You asked for it, you got it, Toyota. Yeah, your prices are going to go way down because we're no longer going to have block of trade out of the Straits of Hormuz, right? So the Somali pirates and all that other crap, right, that we've had to deal with as terrorists take control of that area. So if you have if you have the West coming in, if you've got a peace coalition going in, that is an end to terrorism, an end to all this crazy. We still have a problem with sleeper cells all over the world. Big problem, sleeper cells in Britain. Britain has a lot of them. And the biggest threat right now is terrorist attacks in the United States, Britain, etc., by sleeper cells. That is a huge, huge problem. I just want to go ahead and look quickly at Trump. We're going to just do 4 cards because I have a lot to get through today. Trump right now, regarding this issue, confusion. One of the things that comes out is that he's really not in a position to be covering this. You know, he's not. People say, well, what about Biden? I don't know. I mean, for all I know, Biden was senile. I don't know. I didn't keep track of that sort of thing. I voted Democrat because I support the values. I supported the values of the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party has moved away from a lot of those values, unfortunately. But Biden is not in power right now, so it doesn't really matter. Who's in power is Donald Trump. And 7 of Cups can be a senility card. It can be the person, this and the moon are the 2 cards I look for when I think about senility. 7 of Cups is like pipe dreams, floating in the clouds. He does not present as knowing what's going on, and maybe he's slightly confused. Who knows? There is an offer for peace coming in, 2 of Cups. We have peace moving in as more and more governments move into the Strait of Hormuz, more and more peace troops. Hopes and fears, the economic stability is always a problem. There is Donald Trump. He fired everybody, right? Doge, we're going to fire everybody and save money. Yay, we're going to save money by firing everybody at the federal level. And then what happens? Everybody wound up broke. He ran on a campaign of supplying jobs for people. That was Trump's campaign. I'm going to give. Well, when you fire federal workers right before they're going through their retirement, destroy their retirement, that's not going to help you when it comes to trying to woo your constituents, right? So he did the exact opposite. He slashed jobs. It had a huge ramification on the economy. Our jobs were up 0.7% last month, right? The GDP. So the focus now by the Republicans is to try and redeem themselves, right? They're trying to redeem themselves, which means that they quickly have to start coming up with jobs and rehiring, et cetera, so that they can survive in November. Because if they don't do something quickly to start creating jobs, they will get wiped out in the November midterms. And unfortunately, as I had said about the moon and the 7 of Cups, those are associated with senility. And the moon card is right over Donald Trump, who presents as an air sign male. The King of Swords is an air sign male. And he is a Gemini, I believe. So, honestly, my thoughts when I look at this is that his mental health problems will increase, that Donald Trump's mental health issues will increase. And we will get to surrender in Iran sooner rather than later. The IRGC, the Iranian Guard, is fleeing. Ali Khamenei is dead. His son is severely wounded. The president has quit. Their weapons have been wiped out. They don't really have a lot of weapons left. And the reason why is because of targeted assassination. And that's because every single member of the IRGC has been tagged. You know, when you find a stranded puppy somewhere and you bring it home and you adopt it, you have to tag it, right? You have to put a little chip in it so that you know where the doggy is if the doggy goes missing, right? You can, if somebody else finds the doggy, there's a little chip, and the chip says, well, this is so-and-so's doggy. So that's exactly what happened. Every single IRGC person is carrying a chip that allows Mossad to know the location of that particular person. Where are these chips? Well, that is the frustration and horror for the IRGC, because they don't know where these tracking devices are. Some of the tracking devices are in their cars. Some of the tracking devices are in their clothing. Some of the tracking devices were in the clothing of their bodyguards. In the pins, in their award pins, there were tracking devices. Their pagers, their cell phones. So you have to ask yourself, how long did it take to have every member of the IRGC tagged, to have Hezbollah pagers blow up? Takes a lot of years. Takes a lot of years to be able to build Israeli drones inside of Iran, to have a factory inside of Iran that builds Israeli drones. How many years does that take? So while the average citizen didn't know what was coming, had no idea what was coming. Did you see this coming? I didn't see this coming. People that were doing data collection knew that it was inevitable. And that we were planning it for years. And that it was necessary if you wanted to calculate the least amount of deaths. If you don't want the Taliban to get control of nuclear weapons, if you don't want ballistic missiles fired at the United States that are nuclear, you're going to have to take these people out. And so that's what the world decided to do. That is what the world decided to do. The world decided to take them out before they took us out. Everybody knows what that handshake meant. It meant peace. But how do you get to peace when someone's firing ballistic missiles at you? How do you do that? How do you get to peace if somebody's firing ballistic missiles at you? Do you just build bigger bunkers? Is that what you do? You build bigger bunkers? Well, we tried that. Israelis started building more bunkers, more safe rooms in their homes, right? Running into safe zones inside your homes, building homes that could take missile attacks, but not necessarily take ballistic missile attacks. That smile, oh, look at Egypt there with that big grin on its face. Thank God the nightmare is going to come to an end. Thank God this nightmare is going to come to an end. Thank God this nut job, this fruitcake, is crazy enough to do our shit work for us. And nobody's ever going to know. Nobody's ever going to figure out what that wink, wink, wink Nudge, nudge, nudge. Say no more, say no more. Wink, winky. Take them out, take them out, take them out, take them out, take them out. Scared out of our fucking wits. We're too scared to do it ourselves, but he's crazy enough to do it. So take him out. And that is what they signed up for. That is what they signed up for, my friends, my beautiful spirits. And because they signed up for it, once the coast was clear, they could come out of hiding, being the chickens that they are, right? Chickens. They are chickens, chickens, right? Scaredy cats, right? Once that nightmare is over, once they're no longer afraid, out come the very same people that shook his hand back in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Well, how the hell did this happen? I don't know. Gosh golly. What the hell is happening? What's happening is that finally we are taking control of the Straits of Hormuz, and this nightmare will end. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, his brain is ending. You can see here, this is not conducive to mental health. You know, the two cards that I looked for in mental health, this is a war card and also fears of the economic strain. Again, long term, this is very good for the economy because we'll have open sales, free open sales. We won't have to be dealing with Somali pirates being funded by this terrorist group, terrorism back and forth. We'll be able to build peace zones, homes for Palestinians without the fear of terrorists coming to make hell for them. We also want to move towards more moderation in Israel. As an Israeli citizen, I don't like seeing religious extremism there either on the Israeli side. We want to move more towards the leftist values that built the country. The country was built by leftists. It was supposed to be inclusive. And then a bunch of crazy people came in, a bunch of Johnny-come-latelys, right? But when it was Turkey, it used to be, it was Turkey. It wasn't an independent country. It was Turkey prior to World War II. Then Britain took it, and Britain created a lot of problems for the people of Palestine, right? So Palestinians used to be Jews and Muslims and other groups. A lot of Muslims came in from Iraq to get work in the kibbutzes, right? So the kibbutzes were actually drawing people to Palestine. Once the Jews came in under the Turks let us buy some land. We bought that land from Turkey, by the way. It's another thing that they lie and tell you. There's a lot of lies, but when the Jews went in, the Turks had a bunch of open land. Nobody was living there. No, people were not taken from their homes. And that land was bought up to build kibbutzes. And then Arabs and Jews started living in the kibbutzes, right? It wasn't until the British came after World War II that all the problems started. Divide and conquer, like the Boer War, trying to get people to kill each other. This is what the Brits do. This is historically what they do, divide and conquer, get people to kill each other. And we're still cleaning up the mess that Britain created. Britain and Hitler, right? Britain and Hitler were at war with each other, and they were pot shots at each other, right? The Jews signed up with Britain. They were on the side, even though they didn't like what the British were doing, they still fought alongside the British in World War II, right? British were blocking Jews from fleeing the Holocaust and left Jews to die in the gas chambers of Europe because they wouldn't let the Jews escape to Palestine. So the British have a lot of blood on their hands. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look now at when this war is going to end. I'm thinking fairly soon. Hopefully you guys agree with me. Let's take a look. No, there's not going to be a Sunday show. I don't think so. Because it's my birthday. So I'm doing this instead. When will the war end? I'm not going to lie to people. There's a lot of readers that are just, I'm sorry, they're full of shit. I'm sorry to be rude. I try not to be rude, but when you start lying about my country, at that point, I don't want to be nice to you anymore. That's my country. You've never been to my country. You're pathologically lying. You're licking the balls of Iranian Qatari propaganda. You have no idea what you're talking about. No, the prime minister of Israel is not dead. And shame on you for parroting Iranian propaganda so that you can be popular with your fans on YouTube. Be willing to come up and tell the truth to people. And the chips will fall where they will. I'm not at 100,000 because I refuse to lie to my audience. I'm not going to bash Israel in the middle of a war after the women have been raped and chopped up. It's not your daughter. Who are you to say anything? Same with the fall of Iran. It's not your daughter in prison getting raped every night by a gang of crazy IRGC people in a prison somewhere in Tehran. It's not your daughter. It's not for you to say. It's not for you to say how the Iranian people should feel who are horrified and screaming hysterically. They don't know where their family members are, held hostage by this cult. It's not for you to say. Who are you? I'm sorry, but humble yourself, child. Deal with your problems at home. Go spend time on reservation in your state. If your state has reservations. The people of Missouri were marched out of the entire state. There isn't a single reservation in the state of Missouri. You think there weren't people living in the state of Missouri? They lost their homes. And Native Americans are not fossils. There's over 500 nations currently being oppressed by this government. Go to a reservation and start helping people. Take responsibility for what's happening in your own backyard before you start projecting your shame and guilt on a country you've never been to. The Jewish people went home. We went back to our lands. We kicked the British out and we took our land back, and the British are pissed about it, just like they're pissed at the United States for taking the U.S. territory, right? Know your history. It's not to say that the Israeli government hasn't made mistakes. Of course they have. Certainly they have under Netanyahu. I'm no fan of Netanyahu. But you're sitting around because you want to feel better about yourself, lapping up a bunch of Iranian propaganda about a country you've never been to, refusing to see data, calling films like We Will Dance Again propaganda when it's live film footage of rape posted all over Facebook. I would say to the American people, go take care of yourselves. Go take care of your people. The only reason that there aren't sleeper cells exterminating all of you, the reason you're not in bunkers, is because you've disarmed the Native Americans and because they don't have Qatari money. Because I'll tell you something. If the American Indian movement, AIM, which you might not know anything about, out of the Dakota Hills that wanted to seize the Black Hills in the 1970s, and they were gaining a lot of support, if they had Qatari money and Iranian money, and there were sleeper cells, if they had allies in the American Indian movement, you'd be living in a very different America right now. Just because they don't have the means to take back those lands doesn't mean they don't want to do it. And it doesn't mean that given the opportunity, you wouldn't be in a bunker yourself. Humble yourself, child. Humble yourself. Never mind what happened to African Americans, and is still happening to African Americans today in an unjust society. And ICE detention camps, zip tying little kids, massive crimes against humanity happening right here in the United States. Take care of yourself, child. Okay, so when will the war end? See, that's honesty. That's somebody telling you the truth. Ooh, lots of dreaming going on. You don't have to love me. but at least I told you the truth. Money, 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 money. A new economy is emerging. This new trade route is going to be stabilizing the Middle East. It's going to be creating jobs. It's going to take down Iran, the number one sponsor of state terrorism, and it will be great for the economy. Judgment is sound. I also like that Knight of Cups moving in because it's a piece. This is strictly for entertainment purposes only. I'm just reading tarot cards. But part of what I do for fun is read tarot cards, right? Ooh, a lot of stress. House of Opposition, Fool. War ending. The Knight of Wands is inverted. That's the fire horse. Fire horse is pulling back. Much heartbreak comes. You know, the big issue here is the U.S. economy. It's the U.S. economy I'm really worried about. I want to just check the U.S. economy because that was heartbreak over the economy. Well, the fact that peace troops are coming into the Strait of Hormuz tells me this will probably be, the main surrender will probably happen in the next couple months. It's almost over. They've lost most of their leadership in Iran. So I don't want to be popular. I want to tell the truth. And I'll never be the richest reader, and I'll probably never be the most popular, but I will always be honest. This economy, I feel like things open up after the war, like the strait opens up and there's finally armistice and we no longer have to worry about these fruitcakes in the Middle East. And we have to, yes, we do. We have to deport sleeper cells. If you are in a organization in Dearborn, Michigan that is calling for Sharia law and to topple the U.S. government, then you need to be deported. You don't belong here. We don't want you here. We like having rights as women. We're having enough problem with our own religious nut jobs, right? That's me as a lefty, right? I'm a leftist, which is why I don't want extremist nut jobs that want to put me in a burqa coming to our country, because I'm a leftist, because I want to protect my friends who are LGBTQ. I don't want to see them thrown off rooftops because they're gay or trans. That's why I want you to get the fuck out of my country, because I'm a leftist. New jobs opening up, and the hopes and fears, the economy, and the final outcome is by August, we see a huge improvement in the economy. There's something here about J.D. Vance that I keep getting. This is J.D. Vance's card, by the way. The summer, new jobs. I feel like even if Trump stays in office, he has left. It is as if we have two presidents. It's as if we've got the fake president who's crazy, who goes and plays golf, and then we have the real president, which is J.D. Vance. It's as if we're operating with two presidents by this August, because the sun is high in August, and there's a health crisis over Trump, and new jobs. And the other thing I keep seeing is like an end to the housing crisis. And I don't know if this is because they just start opening up a bunch of government programs for housing and building affordable housing. But Three of Pentacles and Page of Pentacles is very auspicious, because that's a real estate card. J.D. Vance, August. See what I'm saying? Any other readers here? Look at this. Look at this House of Opposition, new homes, food, jobs. And the final outcome is the inverted Knight of Wands. War will end August. All right. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me. Don't worry. Everything is going as it should. Yes, people will die. People die in war. But a lot more people would have died if we had let them continue developing ballistic missiles. And thank God they have not yet been able to get a hold of nuclear weapons, because ballistic weapons and nuclear missiles means that you and I and everybody else would have been in burqa. We would have literally been at the mercy of the Taliban. That's objective reality. They would have held the entire world hostage, and then they would have gained more and more and more and more power until eventually we were at the mercy of these wingnuts. In fact, there's still a lot that has to be done in terms of outing and taking control of sleeper cells here in the United States and in Europe, because these are very dangerous people. And yeah, these are dangerous times, and this should have happened a lot sooner. That's the truth. All right. I want to thank you for listening to this video and wishing me a happy birthday. If you're trying to get in for a reading, you can find all that information below. Or if you need to see me for a medical consult, I would love to offer one. All right. Be kind to all so that all will be kind to you too. God bless. Peace out. We'll see you next time, everyone. Bye. Peace is coming, and the economy will be better because of it. I'm out.